Welcome to the Tech for Good podcast. We are very passionate about two things, technology and our world. In each pod, we will be interviewing some fascinating people, business leaders, but those with a special interest in solving the biggest issues facing humanity today. Think the environment, think healthcare provision during a pandemic, think global social injustice. If you want to know more about technology's immense potential to fix and transform, then you're in the right place. In this episode, I speak to Peter Vanovertveld. Peter is Chief Commercial and Operations Officer for Smart Reporting, a company which has developed groundbreaking technology for the future of medical documentation. For more than 2 decades, Peter has worked for leading organisations in pharma and biotech. In the podcast, we discuss the health sector's response to COVID-19, why structured data can help drive new standards in patient care, and he shares his enthusiasm about increased collaboration in the space. But first, I ask Peter more about his career.
Thank you for the question. When graduated, finished on macroeconomics and political science. Tons of idealism to change the world, which I hope every person leaving university has. Joined the United Nations. Very quickly realized that it's an incredibly relevant and wonderful negotiation and dialogue body at international level. Just wasn't the right fit for me. Discussions go appropriately slow as they should because a lot is at stake. And I felt so much more dynamic at young age. So then used the European Commission, where I helped and worked on understanding and researching decision-making processes in the European institutions to then launch myself into the private industry. They are focused on highly regulated industries, and very early got a wonderful opportunity to put my nose into many, many different areas, from gambling to oil to foodstuffs to healthcare. Something I definitely recommend everybody if they have the chance to take a step through consulting, because you get a flavor of so many different things under such a pressured time, which also teaches you a lot. How can you get things done very quickly and yet at high quality, and use that then to move into healthcare. And I loved having had the opportunity to see different things before I did that, because it only strengthened my belief that that's where I feel most at home. Something I also, again, find if you are lucky enough that you can choose around a little bit, then take your time for that. For some, this can be done in 2 months. For some, it takes a few years. In my case, it was after 7 years of consulting that I realized, no, actually, I know where exactly I want to go, and moved into healthcare. And I'm sure many listeners might do that much faster than I did, but that's okay. And never look back. So I'm very excited that since 2007, I was lucky to get exposed to a large American organization at that point, Baxter. Fantastic company, gave me a wonderful home with a lot of learning opportunity. I actually never forget the pitch that was made to me by the hiring manager, who said, do you want to be a big fish in a small pond in Belgium, or do you want to be in a big pond and have the opportunity to grow? And I loved it. It was a fantastic Danish gentleman called Christian Jurgensen, who gave me the opportunity to move in-house. And from then onwards, I was gifted with many great mentors. I think that's also one of the benefits if you choose between smaller and larger organizations. You will inevitably get much more dynamic and agile environments in smaller companies, and you might be lucky and have amazing mentors there. The benefit of large multinationals, of course, is that they can bring in so much expertise and knowledge that inevitably there will be a few people that you really click with and that can help you grow and point out where you might have unintentionally made mistakes and need to grow. And from that onwards, then I was lucky enough to lead market access and health economics, which are very data-driven parts of a pharmaceutical company, in order to help the NHSs of the world take the right decisions, which products to reimburse and which not. And then moved to the US, had 5 years in the US, which I loved. A really good insight also about the stereotypes on both sides. And if I had a magic wand, I would definitely blend the strengths of the US with the strengths of Europe, because I think both have amazing advantages, local cultural advantages that ought to be combined, because thoroughness in Europe, I think, is a strength. The can-do attitude of the US is a strength. And I ended up enjoying my work so much that I again and again saw the limits of limited data not allowing us to take the right decisions. And that is why most recently I made the switch to smart reporting, a digital documentation organization where we really focus to empower and partner with the NHSs of the world to think through how can you best capture data from clinical practice. How can you do that with the least interference for a doctor, while fully acknowledging there will always be some, but how do we make it as intuitive and straightforward that it fits into the workflow and to some extent optimizes and streamlines the workflow? And with that data, improve decision-making going forward. So it was a wonderful journey. I look forward to many more opportunities to grow, because by no means am I anywhere near the end. Still very young and still tons to grow. It's such a dynamic environment, healthcare, and I think any listener who is considering it, have a hard look at it. Your skills will be needed, because there are always areas where healthcare can improve, and therefore it ought to deserve attention of many of us, and with it the contribution of many of us to get better and better.
Really, really fascinating stuff, Peter. And we're going to touch on a few of the points you've raised there in a bit. I want to take you back though to when you were early in your career, you said you went down that healthcare path. Why do you think you did that? Was it circumstances? Was it an interest you'd always had in that particular industry? Why healthcare?
A good question. I to be honest, gambling. I was lucky enough to work with amazing leaders in the gambling industry, inspired and interested me a lot too. It was really that because of a sports background and some sports injuries, but also a few other events that transpired, that I felt I feel most at home there. It fits with my purpose, thinking through how you can improve decision making around which products to reimburse, improve decision making around where do you find the most appropriate guidelines. I found it fascinating, the ability to bring bright minds together. I had the opportunity to work on a project on infectious diseases and on antimicrobial resistance. And if you start to read into the scientific details of antimicrobial resistance, and you realize that with a few small steps, we can actually, all of us can contribute to minimizing that risk. If you take an antibiotic, take it to the end of the cycle. Don't stop after 3 days when you feel better. It's such a small thing, but all of us can contribute to that. And you realize there's so much you can achieve positively for humankind, dare I say, but certainly for the country you live in, if you help in healthcare. And I loved it. I felt most at home there. And as I said, never look back. For me, this works. It's close to my values.
Great stuff, Peter. Now, I want to introduce the topic of technology a bit as well. And you've spoken about data in your current role with smart reporting, how important that is. Maybe I can, as an introduction, get your thoughts on the kind of excitement but challenges that come with this amazing opportunity, I guess, we have with data and with new technologies, very exciting technologies, which are impacting patient care ultimately in healthcare today. But there's still a lot of work to do, certainly in those areas. What's your assessment of the landscape in healthcare right now? And obviously, you can look at it from a perspective of publicly funded healthcare, private healthcare, the industry sort of side of it as well. Do you think we are on a journey to ultimately much better care, much more personalized care for patients, considering all of those aspects?
Yeah, I definitely think we are we continue on a journey to constantly improving better care. And I fully appreciate sometimes that's difficult to see. And with recent challenges, of course, that we all had with the pandemic, depending on how you look at it, you might have felt individually let down, or you might have felt that the governments of this world are sometimes lost. That's all true, I'm sure, to some extent. The amazing thing, though, is if you look at what treatments we have available nowadays, where if you just take the last few years, where we've gone to with oncology care, where there are treatments where never would we've thought in the past that treatments are available. Immunization, again, now we consider that a given, but go back 50, 60 years and we were still investigating how to identify agents that can help immunize you against one or the other infectious diseases. The improvements are ongoing, and with DNA sequencing, the door was open to gene therapies, and the improvements that happened over the last few years. I had the pleasure to work very closely on rare diseases, including, amongst others, a bleeding disorder called hemophilia in my career, and was able to observe myself by talking to specialists how not just the thought, but actually the development of gene therapies in that space has started. And the thought of a otherwise life-threatening disease to potentially not just be treated so people can have as normal lives as possible, but possibly can be cured, is amazing. And there's so much more to come if we, and I truly believe that data and technology is in the current period we're in, is going to be the next big accelerator, because what we can do in the lab, I think with the current technology, has almost maxed out what we can do. And I'm sure there will be another leap forward 5-10 years from now, because everything constantly evolves. But in the short term, I believe better insight into what you currently can do with treatments available, and with it better insight how you identify new treatments by having better data available to you. I think that is the accelerator, and there is no limit. I really anticipate that within our lifetimes there will be cures for many areas that currently we have no solution to, because now the evolution is so quick. If you allow me to deviate for a second, there was in the late 2010s, there was an amazing initiative by the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute and Harvard in the US, where they crowdsourced a competition to use around 200 lung scans to very quickly develop AI for lung cancer screening. And worldwide competition, 60,000 or so people participated, and I think through 500 teams or so. And long story short, the team that won, that actually within 3 or 4 months got to the level of a trained pulmonologist, a specialist, because the team actually came out of the automotive industry. So they were used to learning cars how to self-drive. So they were used to constantly engineering so many moving things that they used some of the algorithms they had developed there to actually screen the lungs. And if you take that as an example, there's an amazing article that was published in JAMA on that. If you take that as an example, I think one thing that makes me so optimistic about innovation is how much cross-pollination there will happen. There might be a listener who says, yeah, but healthcare isn't even what interests me the most. That still doesn't mean that you can't help us, because there is so much now in other industries happening that will have an impact on healthcare. Take nanotechnologies, the surgeries that nowadays are possible because of a stent, for instance, for cardiovascular disease, wouldn't have been possible 40, 50 years ago. So I think it's a wonderful field to deploy yourself and your skills.
Yeah, and when you talk about specific examples like that, Peter, it really demonstrates why, why it's such an exciting field for people like you, I can imagine, to work in. And even though, as you said earlier, the industry, came under immense scrutiny during the early stages of the pandemic. I was going to ask you about that actually. Do you feel like ultimately, you talk about innovation? I mean, that was innovation at super speed, wasn't it? During the early stages of COVID-19 and the outbreak of that disease. Do you think the healthcare industry has ultimately come out quite well of from the pandemic, given the responses and what the industry's been able to do, especially around vaccinations and data, and how data has informed decision making around many different aspects of the pandemic? Do you think it's come out quite well ultimately?
I think the industry and the healthcare apparatus has come out quite well. I do think as a society we suffered, and I have nothing but sympathy for the enormous pressure that was put on the caregivers. So nurses, doctors, clinicians, even reception personnel in hospitals. Anyone who has somehow worked in community or in practices or in hospitals, I fully appreciate that they might have been stretched to the limit and need a break. Unfortunately, it's not easy to take a break if you work in healthcare, but there definitely was a stretch. I also think society suffered a bit because I don't consider it helpful to polarize to a point where we threaten people who have different opinions than ourselves. I think there are very valid arguments where one person can, for him or herself, conclude that with lack of long-term safety data, initially they preferred not to be vaccinated. I think while for me the choice was easy, I felt that I, for myself, concluded that risk-benefit, it was the right thing to do. I can fully understand that not everybody might have drawn the same conclusion and is fully entitled to draw a different conclusion. And I think there we were a bit unhelpful amongst us to start to be fairly provocative towards people that have different opinions. That I think suffered. But again, how healthcare as a whole operated, sensational. How quickly we're able to get vaccines, unheard of. And data played a role. They learned from previous situations and how patient recruitment, for instance, worked. And really heads off to the NHS. You guys are lucky. Europe is lucky. In most countries, we have very good healthcare systems, if not to say all countries, we have very good healthcare systems. But the NHS, of course, stands out. You guys have a fantastic approach where very quickly there was coordination to find those who want to participate. It's very easy in hindsight to challenge one or the other manufacturer, including a UK manufacturer like AstraZeneca, to say this or that could have been done better. And we definitely want to learn because there are fair criticisms. But I think we ought to differentiate between fair criticisms, how to do it better next time, and implying that we would have done it better if we had been in their shoes. Because there aren't many situations where I can think of where initially with so many unknowns and all the pressure that was put on them, that many of us stood up and said, please let me decide. So I think overall, we came out much stronger. We've learned a ton. I actually think in the context of data, we've also realized that quicker and better data analysis on an ongoing basis for any healthcare system is key, because there are publications from France and Italy, for instance, that touch upon the fact that without being able to draw conclusive decisions out of it, you know that wastewater analysis shows that COVID viruses were in Europe long before the year turn 2020, definitely in fall before. And if you look at the spike rate of pneumonia infections in the last quarter before formally the pandemic was called, at least it indicates that maybe some level of virus was already starting to spread. And better data management going forward might be able to help us identify such spikes. You know, if we all of a sudden see 20-30% deviations in incidence of one or the other disease, maybe we very quickly can ask ourselves, hey, what's going on? You know, Can we help? Can we isolate? Can we identify what the source is? And that is definitely a learning. We can always go back and say we should have, but that doesn't help. What does help is what can we do for the future?
Hi, I'm Daniel Brigham, editor of the Tech for Good magazine. I hope you're enjoying this pod, and if you want more, why not head over to techforgood.net for some amazing and thought-provoking stories. You can read about one company's mission to use digital technologies in the fight against HIV, or learn how social media can help refugees take control of their narratives. For those insights and more, read and subscribe at techforgood.net.
Yeah, and when you think about that future, as we've discussed, Peter, it is really exciting, especially when you think about, as you've said there, that the power of data. Now, you mentioned earlier smart reporting, the company you're currently working with. I feel like that's given you, that role is giving you an opportunity to really explore that potential of data. I know you introduced them earlier. Maybe you can talk again a little bit more about what smart reporting does as a company. What is its mission?
Yeah, we really focus on curating data at the source. What does that concretely mean? We developed software, so any IT engineer who feels like they want to program and make lives better, please reach out to our UK affiliate, or for that matter, our German mother company. We're always interested in additional firepower on that end. But we developed software that makes it easier for the clinician to capture diagnosis. Focus really being here on a complete diagnosis. It's a bit like starting your car and forgetting to put the safety belt on. The car drives, you can go ahead, but you better be lucky. And we feel that we shouldn't leave it to luck how patients ultimately end up in the healthcare system, but by making sure that there is a complete diagnosis with input software that facilitates that, for instance, on any lung image, that all information that the image provides, it's actually captured in a structured report that then goes to the specialist to interpret and take the next decisions. That we really facilitate this in the input phase, but subsequently that the benefit of such structured data and completeness is also used in the reverse side to further inform future diagnosis. Because if complete data diagnosis is pooled and you realize that with longitudinal data that patients with this and that similar picture and subsequent treatment have been very quickly responding and cured or at least treated well, then that can inform subsequent decisions. And of course, you can argue, but isn't that what a doctor does anyway? Yeah, of course. But the whole point is we want to stop limiting it to one doctor and make the knowledge of all doctors available to all of them as well. What we do not want to do is interfere with the doctor-patient relationship, because we believe that is an incredible interpersonal and an important dialogue that ought to continue. What we do want to make available to the individual doctor is the knowledge of the greater community, and with it inform his or her choice to the best possible way. And that's really the passion we deploy every day. We have a large number of clinicians in our team. We have a large number of software engineers in our team. And that doesn't mean we wouldn't want to take on anybody else. I myself, I'm not a clinician nor a software engineer, so there's definitely room for other talents too. But that's what we do, and we do it with enormous passion. We believe we can make a difference, including in the UK. That's why we have a UK affiliate, because we believe, as I said before, the NHS is an incredibly important partner. And if we through our team can partner with them, can partner with organizations and hospitals and trusts in the UK to make structured reporting a hallmark of their own institute, we'd be delighted to do so.
What, Peter, would you say is the main challenges that smart reporting's solution is solving, the problems that it can resolve for clinicians for healthcare organizations? What would you say?
I think that the main problem we try to sort for clinicians is indeed that the balance between the time pressure they're all under, because let's not kid ourselves, a clinician's job is brutal in that respect. There is a lot of activity-based assessments, how many patients can they see in a day? And there they speak 5 minutes too long with one patient, they'll immediately get reprimanded for that. So that pressure, and at the same time allowing them to the best and fastest way possible to ensure complete diagnosis is fed into the system. I would say those two pieces on the front line, ultimately to improve the research and development in healthcare as a whole. If we, for instance, create better data on current treatments, think it through, that can be as amazing as potentially facilitating future clinical trials. Because if you were to have complete transparency on current, we mentioned lung before, let's say lung cancer, including current standard of care, the NHS requests the data that is submitted for the, or take MHRA that is submitted for registration for an oncolytic for lung treatment or any other tumor treatment, that it has a control arm of some sorts, which makes total sense. We want that. But the control arm very often is placebo or current standard of care. Now, you could skip that if you have such a sound pool of real-world evidence that the control arm always is a so-called synthetic arm. So it is just drawing the comparison from current real-world evidence. And with that, you can accelerate R&D. You can make certain therapies that don't work quicker be phased out, others that do work quicker get to the market. Risk adjustment, because again, NICE has a really difficult task to assess where are inconsistencies of data or potential data gaps, and they need to account for that because there are limited funds available to decide which treatments you make available to the public. But if you were to have better, sounder data available from the beginning, and that's why we focus so much at curation at the source, data curation at the source, then decision-making is easier. You have to have much less of these so-called discounting discussions because it's clearer where the data reveals improvements versus not. So for me, that is the problem we're trying to fix, and where we're very keen to collaborate with all stakeholders. So it's not something which we can fix in isolation, not at all.
Really interesting insights, Peter. Now, I know you're really just at the beginning of your journey with smart reporting, but how encouraged are you from what you've seen so far, and how much does it excite you, the difference that that structured reporting and the work smart reporting is doing could make in the future?
Very excited. And for me, it's also the collaboration with amazing organizations like GE Healthcare, Siemens, Canon, Fujitsu, you name it. There's so many good players out there on the imaging side. You similarly see, obviously, if I reference our oncology work, we are lucky enough to be partner in an amazing project that the European authorities support, Optima, and there you have the Roche, Bayer, Pfizer, Amgens of the world who participate in that. The breadth of players that contribute is enormous, and back to where I was before, there's almost no limit to where we can go with them, and as such, the world is our oyster, I would say.
An interesting point you make there, Peter, about collaboration and different companies, organizations coming together. Do you feel encouraged by the amount of collaboration that we're seeing in the industry right now?
Yeah, can it be more? Absolutely. So, for instance, that component of when do we let the Amazons and Microsofts come in versus the Roches and Novartis versus the Siemens GEs I mentioned or others versus the Cleveland Mayo Clinic or bigger trusts in the UK. How do we bring them together in a complementary way? for sure, there will be one or two initiatives where people will step on each other's toes. It's innovation always has a bit of friction because you're changing things. But I think, at least I take enormous positives from the pictures that was drawn during the pandemic, where a lot of people realized there's so much we can do together. And allow me to go back to the question you asked before. What confidence do I draw from my colleagues? I mean, that's why this mix of different characters is so important. And I can only encourage anybody, whether they are, highly extroverted and like to come up with great ideas, or they love to study the books and the clinical data. Doesn't matter. All of these different characters are important in a debate. If it weren't for some bookworms, we probably would have never discovered one or the other treatment in the first place. And if it weren't for dare I say, the Elon Musks of the world, we don't have any daredevils either who go out and say, let's just do it. So collaboration, I think, as difficult as it is, let's not kid ourselves, it is not always easy to bring the NHS and private industry at the same table, to reference again the UK setting, because there can be experiences we might have had in the past that lead people to have certain stereotypes and views about one or the other. But truth is, at least every human person I've met as I worked in healthcare always tries to do the best with the resources they have. And if we grant each other that benefit of the doubt, then actually we're all on the same page. And yes, we acknowledge that there might be certain goals we need to achieve that might not always 100% align. But the ultimate objective to help have as few people become patients, because I still believe prevention is always better than treatment, and those that need to be treated have the treatment as good and as qualitatively valuable as possible is key. So I'm very optimistic on collaboration, and believe that even the skills around it have improved. Take the means we're using here to record this podcast. I cannot imagine 10 years ago how many virtual meetings nowadays actually work. They actually really work, and how much can be done. 10 years ago, that was impossible. Am I therefore saying we don't need face-to-face? I'm not saying that at all. I think face-to-face still beats anything. But their collaboration has improved too.
Great stuff, Peter. And you're clearly very enthusiastic about the future of your industry. I think, perhaps unfairly, the healthcare industry, maybe especially in this country, has had a bit of a reputation for not innovating quickly enough and not embracing technology. But really, considering everything we've spoken about today, there's a real kind of clear path forward here, isn't there, with technology and data at the center of how, if you talk about tech for good, which we talk about a lot, this is tech for good in microcosm, isn't it, really, with an industry like healthcare, which is so critical to everyone around the world, obviously, and technology being used and data being used to really improve services, improve patient care, prevent more people becoming ill. As you said, prevention is a massive thing. It's a very positive outlook, isn't it?
Very much so, Ben. And I think, where I can, I will promote you guys, because I think podcasts like yours, Tech for Good, it's amazing, and it's really important. Every little helps. Take a health app. Some of us use these to do yoga or meditation or stretching, but it all helps. Who knows? The twice weekly stretching exercises you do might actually help you next time you go running from tearing a muscle. Now, you tell me what you prefer, stretching every now and then, or being in hospital for, well, tearing a muscle doesn't necessarily require a hospital, but at least being homebound because you can't run. And these are small things, but nowadays you have apps to be that, for instance, for diabetes patients to track their blood sugar. Now, how amazing is that? Technology makes that possible. Those of us who had to look into their nutrition, the same apps that allow you to track blood sugar for diabetes, actually, if you're very health conscious, can also allow you to track what happens when you eat a piece of chocolate. I coincidentally, out of personal interest, did that, and it was amazing. Not that I didn't know that you get a glucose spike, but to see the difference between having that and then even eating a croissant and see what happens, because that's the difference between simple and complex carbs, just for those who are into that as much as I am. And then having full grain bread eaten and seeing the much slower release of energy in your body. And would I have been that conscious? No, technology made it possible. And you take it to so many dimensions where I honestly believe tech is there to enable us to do so many good things. And therefore, a podcast like yours and all those of you who listen, especially those who you're in that space, keep at it. Think about how technology can improve. Those of you who are innovators, think about how your ideas could make a difference for others. Test it with specialists. Go to a clinician, say, hey, does that actually address an unmet need? And go for it. I mean, the space that can be filled there, the improvement for patients that can be done, and it's on every dimension. I've mentioned patient registries before. What a difference a good patient registry can make. But a patient registry can mean patient-reported outcomes. I go back to the cell phone. Imagine any of us were to suffer, I mentioned hemophilia before, a bleeding disorder, but there are many other rare diseases where it's very difficult to pull data together, but technology might made it possible. Maybe partnering with a patient organization to actually help them roll out information to their patients is a good way of dealing it. And it's all possible thanks to technology. And there is the tool itself, the smartphone, but then there is the wireless data transportation. Then there is the app itself. Then there's how do you integrate it into an EHR, electronic health record system. So there's so many components where technology has actually made the difference. That's where my statement before came from, that I do believe data and technology will be the next big accelerator, or is the next big accelerator, I should say, because we don't have to wait. It's here.
That was the Tech for Good podcast. Listen, subscribe, and rate us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Stitcher.